Hey, I'm Paul Banis with GreatDad.com, and I'm here in another one of my weekly conversations with dads that who have new ideas. And I'm always excited to talk to another person who is as focused on fatherhood as I have been over the last, 23 years. I've got an older daughter, 23. Andy Goldstrom, welcome to our show.
Hey, thanks, Paul. Great to be here.
Great. So Andy is you are totally 100% focused on coaching fathers, and you've got a website, parentsjourneycoaching.net. But really, is that really, or is it's parenting coaches with a emphasis on fathers?
Yeah, I coach parents, so
Right.
It's not just fathers, but because I'm a guy and because I am a dad, I certainly have more experience and an understanding of what makes a dad tick and what makes a dad run into trouble or be able to connect with his kids.
Yeah, and we both know that's really a valuable angle, but quite often not as often as frequently seen in the world. I mean, with my own experience, quite often, women are like, "Oh, wow, a guy actually was interested in this and coming into it." Has that been your experience too?
Oh, definitely. I mean, the moms have a special relationship with their kids, based upon the way women are wired and the fact that they gave birth to the children.
Yeah.
You can't take that emotional connection away. But dads are as important, if not as important, not more important, but as important, to kids' development, and having a positive influence from the male part of the family too. And, we were talking before, when parents struggle, be it just the dad himself or just the mom herself, or a couple, either who are married or not married, they could be partners, or they could be separated or divorced where they're co-parenting. Most of the calls I get are from the woman. They initiate because they understand that there's a problem that they're trying to address, and they want to have somebody to talk to who can give them some direction because they think they're failing as parents or losing direction or not knowing what to do. And my magic is being able to connect with the dads and get them engaged, get them vulnerable, get them involved, because their participation and their ability to be themselves but also be effective parents and effective partners is really an important part of their job. And parenting is, we all think about our careers, and, that's important from a professional and financial standpoint, but from a personal standpoint, there's no more important job. And there's no manual. You don't go to school for it. There's, you kind of just fall into it and watch how others do it, and you kind of figure it out along the way, and you make certain mistakes along the way, and some of them are consequential, some of them are not. But when you run into a real big speed bump, which happens in life, right, sometimes you need some additional support.
Yeah, there's so many things in the last couple of things you just said, but the one I want to focus on first is the value of getting ahead of this. Quite often, as coaches, we talk about therapy as kind of helping somebody pull themselves out of a hole, and coaches usually are trying to help somebody move from 100% to 110% or more. How often do you see families who are willing to make this kind of investment in how the strategy of their parenting before before trouble hits, and what is the value of that? Because I think a lot of people are they think kind of parenting is organic, and why would you focus on something before a problem?
Sure. Well, not often.
Not often enough, right?
Not often, but it's welcome when it does happen. And think about it. Every generation has had its parenting challenges and opportunities, but we've got a confluence of things that have gone on in the past 5 years or so, relating to COVID, relating to social media and its algorithms and its influence, relating to drugs and the accessibility of drugs. And there's so many things that are challenging our kids today, and they're going to face it and struggle with it. And so if a parent sees and recognizes that our ability to influence our child in the right way and handle it in the right way, rather than being reactive to it is something we want to invest in, it's probably the best investment you can make. And I have, so, you know, I have a number of clients who have done that. One currently has a 13-year-old who frankly isn't a bad kid. He's just a little defiant right now because his hormones are going and he's trying to find his way through the world. And the parents have reached out and basically said, you know, we don't want to see this pattern continue because we don't want him to get into more trouble and have to bail him out of jail or something like that. And so I said, congratulations, you know, you've come to me at the right time. And if you think about it, in other instances, do you want to go to the doctor when you have, you know, before you have cancer or after you have cancer? You know, do you want anything you're proactive about? Obviously, you don't want to spend a bunch of time and money on things that aren't likely to occur. But if your good prevention is smart, and you can always get better at being a parent, at being a partner, at being a friend. There are a lot of people who I work with who take it back to work because there are approaches that overlap, because at the end of the day, it's getting the best out of people, right? And if you're a leader in an organization or a coworker of some sort, you know, these are things that certainly overlap.
Right. And we talked a little bit about how there are many different models. Do you have in your mind, I mean, are there a set number of parenting models that are appropriate or well respected or anything, or are they just, each family kind of does it on their own and figures it out unless they get the help from somebody who can put structure around it?
Well, there are 4 types of categories of parenting, and there are some that work best, and we can unpack this a little bit more, but there are 4 distinctive parenting styles, and one is called authoritative. Second one's authoritarian.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow.
Third one is permissive, and the fourth one is uninvolved.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, you know, and the characteristics are, you know, if you're authoritative, you're demanding, yet you're sensitive and responsive to your kids. So you can be demanding, yet sensitive and responsive. If you're authoritarian, you're demanding, but you're stern and punitive. If you're permissive, you're sensitive and responsive, but you don't enforce any limits. There are no boundaries. And if you're uninvolved, you're stern and punitive, but you don't enforce limits either and have no boundaries. So it's a you know, it's a quadrant basically, right, of an X and a Y axis with those things. And you know, it shouldn't be a surprise to anybody, or maybe it is, just filling in the blanks and understanding based upon these 4 models. But authoritative parenting, the first one I introduced, encourages kids to be responsible, to think for themselves, to consider the reasons for rules. So you can create rules, but you can also involve your kids in the discussions, understand the consequences, and be able to enforce them. Authoritarian parenting are parents who expect their orders to be obeyed without question and rely on punishment or the threat of punishment to control their kids. Permissive parenting are parents who are responsive and warm, but reluctant to enforce the rules. And uninvolved parenting are parents who offer their children little emotional support and fail to enforce standards of conduct. So it shouldn't be any surprise to you that the evidence is that kids from authoritarian families are worse off than kids from authoritative families.
Right.
The authoritative families are the ones that work best, and it's because, and the reason it works best is when you have boundaries. Most people think that kids who have rules in their house are resistant to that, and the parents are acting like disciplinarians and difficult, and the kids are going to push back on the rules and all the rest. But the fact of the matter is if the rules are implemented appropriately and in the right way in the right time, it actually makes kids feel safer.
Oh, yeah.
whether they're young kids or teenagers, because they know they know the lanes that they can stay in and be safe and do the right thing and get rewarded for it or acknowledged for it, as opposed to driving off the road or going in the wrong direction. And so, the problem is that some parents don't enforce boundaries or don't create boundaries. They don't communicate them well. They don't enforce them properly. And then it becomes a tug of war, and nobody wants that, right?
Yeah. Well, I think that touches on really one of the biggest challenges of parenting, is this idea of being intentional every day that you're parent, because I guess we think that, like I said, it's kind of organic and just kind of changes, and it does. But when you are in it, 100%, you are kind of watching that ebb and flow. And I don't know if you're changing the rules, but you have that authoritative approach where there is a direction, there is a leadership, and there is a path forward that your kids know, and it's easier for everybody to follow along, versus like a permissive parent, which is wonderful. It gets a lot of smiles and giggles all the time, which is immensely rewarding in the moment, but is probably anti your objectives as time goes on.
Agreed. I mean, at the end of the day, it's your and your partner's house, right? You're paying the bills, you're the parents, you get to decide what goes. The question is it truly in the best interest of the kids? And is it something you can implement and enforce? And what parents do is they tend to be reactive. We talked about being proactive versus reactive. They tend to react to a situation and try and enforce something reactively, rather than saying, or they try and create rules for 1,000 things, right? So literally what I try and coach parents in my parents journey coaching, I try and coach them into pick 5 things that are important in your household. We all eat dinner together one night a week on Friday nights. That's a rule of the house. We don't smoke in the house. We have to do our homework before we have access to our technology or our phones. There's you have to be honest, and present those and have your child participate in some of those rules, because they may think there's an important rule for the house too, and then talk about what some of the consequences are for not obeying the rules. And you always have to love your kid regardless, unconditionally, but you're able to enforce and implement it that way, rather than you catch your kid smoking the first time and you ground them for a month, right? As opposed to having a rule saying where there's agreement up front saying there's no smoking in the house, or this will be the benefit of the consequence, and they know it in advance. They can process it and live with it, as opposed to it always being reactive. And men and women both bring things to the table based upon the way they were raised and the way that they see the world. And for instance, for me, I was raised my parents divorced when I was 12. And I was essentially, my teenage years, I was raised by my mom. I saw my dad, but I was stuck in between 2 divorced parents. Right. And it wasn't easy. And I literally became a get or done kind of guy. I had to kind of get a job sooner than I probably would have. I was 12 years old. I had to find a way to make money. I had to, when it came to girl issues or fixing a car or things at school, or just about anything, I kind of just figured it out. My mother was going through her own stuff, trying to figure out her things, and I didn't have the person I could really confide in comfortably, given who I was and all the rest. So what does that mean? That means that as an adult, when my kids went through some adversity, rather than supporting them, I was like, why don't you just suck it up and get it done? That's what I did. Yeah, I get that. Right? What's wrong with you? And that didn't go very well. And so, and some parents are brought up with certain rules and values that they bring to the table that are important, but it has to fit today's kids in the right way, and sometimes kids have to, what I call, bump into the world. And that means they have to be safe, but at the same time experience some success and failure on their own without being rescued or without being told exactly what to do. Left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot. That's how they learn. And most of life is being able to bounce back from failure and enjoying the success that much more. And if you never fail because your parents tell you exactly what to do all the time or admonish you every time you do fail, you're never going to want to bounce back. You're never going to feel good about yourself. And guys want to be less vulnerable than women in general. And so, when you're continuously pushing your kid like the baseball coach or the softball coach, as opposed to supporting your kid and just letting them be kids, there's a different dynamic. And all people want two things in life, other than to be happy and independent. They want a sense of control, and they want a sense of being understood. And so control can take various forms. Control can take, when I say to a parent, when your kid wants to have control, what does that mean? A kid would say, or the parent might say, well, that means they can go out any day at any time that they want. They can do whatever they want because they're in full control. And I say that's one definition, but not exactly what I'm looking at. I'm looking at, they have the ability to make choices. Mm-hmm. And so if you give them a couple of choices, like you want to talk to them, or and you want to talk to them about something like cleaning their room, you can approach them and say, I'd like to talk to you about cleaning your room. I know it's been a challenging issue for you, but I really need to talk to you about that. Is now a good time? Or we can talk a little bit later when you're not involved in your homework or not involved in your game or not doing anything. You're giving them a choice. You're still in control. You're still going to address the issue, but you're giving them some respect for their time. And then when you talk to them about it, you talk about certain consequences or or benefits of them cleaning their room. They get to make the choice about whether to act or not act. And you're not nagging them. A lot of parents just drive themselves up the wall because they carry the burden of their child's actions and behaviors, and it's really their issue. And you're there.
How do you handle that? Because I think every parent has run into that, is that, like, with the best of intentions, they've set out rules like, these are the chores. You have to take out the garbage on Wednesdays. You have to bring in the bins on Thursdays. You have to wash the dishes on Monday, whatever it is. And then the kids don't follow through. And then the parents are constantly either nagging or getting tired of nagging because they feel like they've been really clear as to what the responsibilities are. And then they don't get the response they expect.
Right. And totally common. And the reason is because it was just implemented without a discussion, without a consequence that everybody that was agreed on, and without follow through. And once you set a precedent, you give an inch, they'll take a mile. So if they can get out of it, they'll get out of it, you know, and so.
And that's, I think it's important to stop there, is that when they get out of it and they skip off, I think a lot of parents, then their tendency to say, my God, my kid is just a lazy bum. He doesn't follow directions. Obviously doesn't have respect for me. And they go to this other place versus realizing a lot of times kids, especially adolescents, they don't have it's not an evil brain that they're constantly trying to, get out of everything, but they just have other priorities, other things in their heads. And the fact that they didn't do this task isn't it's not a negative mark on them. I guess it's a challenge for both parent and child.
Yeah, a child's brain's not fully developed. They don't have the maturity or the experience to prioritize and be able to process all that stuff at times. So it needs to be made clear and concise.
Yeah.
with certain follow through so that the kid knows it's a priority.
Yeah. So
And
I imagine as a coach, I mean, you've expressed a lot of opinions today, but as a coach, a lot of what we do is we try to focus on values and on the parent on what they think is important and let them come up with solutions. Or how do you balance that between, I mean, I know that in my own coaching, and sometimes I just so desperately want to say, just do this. But how do you balance that in a parenting situation where you know that there are some kind of proven things that work, and that on the other hand, there are the values of the parent, like some cases you might say, oh, a parent is just, their orientation is just, you work hard and you get what you want, and you get it, and my kid's not like that. And yeah, I think you get what I'm asking.
yeah, I mean, this isn't the widget business. It's not a one size fits all. And I'm not here to prescribe something to say, take this medicine or take this one approach. In fact, I spend a lot of time doing intake with parents. And the reason is because what they experience as a child, the relationships they have with other important people in their life, what's worked or not worked in their parenting or in other parts of their life, what their goals are as parents and as partners, or is all very important, and allows me to create a baseline of understanding so I can leverage that to help them build on what's worked for them, as opposed to just implement something that's canned. But the important part, so that investment up front brings out a lot to the surface and informs me so that I can put together a tailored plan. And I have a framework. It's called the 4A framework.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about assessing, which is a lot of what I just described, then addressing, which is creating a tailored plan, then acting, allowing the plan to be implemented, and then adjusting. Yep. And so over a period of weeks, you're going through that process where you're trying to implement an approach based upon what's coming up and what your goal is. You're trying to act on it, see how it works, and then fine tune it. Yeah. And people can read, parents could read books. There are a lot of books out there. They can watch videos and things like that, but it's not the canned approach that works. It's the fine tuning and adjustment.
Well, yeah, I think that's the key is the adjusting, is this iterative idea that you're hopefully you're getting maybe better as a parent, but also the kids are changing. I mean, some of those times, at some points in their lives, they're changing week by week. So if you're still stuck on them at age 4 and they're age 6 or whatever the delta is, you're kind of like off the mark.
Yeah, well, let's give an example. So somebody will that I'm talking to will engage with me, and they'll have an issue that they'll bring up, and they'll try and implement it based upon an approach that we agree on, and we'll rehearse it. We'll role play a little bit, right? Right. So that they have the tools and have the approach, but then when they try and implement it that week, sometimes it goes perfectly, but sometimes either they didn't implement it right because they hadn't practiced enough, or they hadn't swung the bat enough, or the kid responds in a different way than they expected, right? So they come back to me on that. And then we say, okay, this worked, but this didn't work, or this, or whatever. And then I've got years of experience where I've seen this movie before, and I can basically say, okay, good for you for giving it a shot. You did this right. This could have been a little bit different or a little bit better or whatever. Let's tweak it and then try that again. And then they go and do that until they, and pretty soon after they get it right. And usually within a couple weeks after first engaging with me, they see a big change in their attitude and their behavior. And a lot of parents focus on fixing their kid. Why is you're talking about laziness earlier. Why is my kid so lazy? Why is my kid, I was able to get a job or figure stuff out. What's wrong with my kid? And they don't realize that a big part of it is how the parents have interacted with the kid, not just the way the kid is. And then when the kid goes offline, it's really not, it's not the kid trying to cause a problem. It's the kid just trying to cope in the world and being able to figure things out. and they may have some information. Some of it may be good or bad, but they have some information they're trying to deal with and process with based upon the stimuli that comes at them. And but they don't have the experience. And information plus experience is what gives you knowledge. So until you have both, it's hard to,
So you could incorporate a values orientation in the the assessment, like trying to establish family, what the values are in each individual family and communicate that? Is it one of your tenets, or is that?
Sure. I can give you an example of that. I try to, I came from a business background before I became a parent coach, and mission, vision, and values is really important in a business organization. And it's a little bit the same with a family. And an example I'll get, and the values of family are important. So, one of the families I worked with where we were trying to establish those values, they had a goal of they had a pool in their backyard, and they wanted to be the family that always, that in the summer people would feel comfortable coming to and enjoying the pool.
Social open.
Yeah. And so we say, great, we want to be the family that people like to gather around. Okay. Well, what kind of behaviors or values do we need to have in order for that to work? Mm-hmm. Right? Can't have, the pool has to be cleaned and maintained. We can't be going to summer school, if we're going to be entertaining or be, or be that family that's going to be around. We have to keep our rooms clean. We have to do, if you want us to go out and, buy all the food and allow us to invite your friends over, there's certain things that you're going to have to do on your end. And so that becomes kind of the North Star.
Yeah.
For and it goes much further than obviously just being the pool party family or being the
sure,
family that has, right? It talks about community. It talks about being responsible. It talks about communicating. It talks about engaging with with friends and family. There's so much there. Yeah. And then but so if everybody's rowing in the same way, then it becomes a really beautiful thing.
So a few weeks ago, I interviewed Aaron Shelley, who's got a book called The Flywheel Effect, and he's really focused on this corporate model. Like it's really that's the centerpiece. Like bring that corporate model right to the family, overlay it. P&L, the whole entire thing. And after I met with him, and I was kind of nodding my head because I think a lot of that planning, like having quarterly meetings and stuff, it can be really valuable. It's a structure that especially a lot of dads can really understand. And then I saw, I don't know if it was a tweet or just somebody who was like, all that Stephen Covey crap about plan with the end in mind, or work with the end in mind, or start with the end in mind for families.
Try to understand before being understood.
Well, that's another side of it.
Is a Covey one.
This person was opining like a family is not a corporation. A family is not the same thing. So throw all that out the window. It's it's difference moving. You can't possibly do that. And then I kind of like, because I can understand a humanist saying they don't want it to be a corporate driven thing, but I still see the value of the model. How do you feel about that?
Structure is important. There's a happy medium to be achieved. I haven't read that book about the flywheel. Would be interested in it, but literally, if you run your company like a family, that's a problem because people get away with stuff and you can't hire and fire, and family companies are tough. Family companies are tough. The other way around, I learned pretty early on. My wife would say to me, or my kids would say to me, Dad or Andy, this isn't a business meeting. When I would talk to them about something. So you have to, and there's a much different dynamic. I had I was an entrepreneur, grew my businesses. The thing that I was most known for was not being the top sales guy or the biggest, best strategist or whatever. It was somebody who really knew how to empower people and scale the company through people, because the people at the end of the day are the ones on the front lines who understand the customer turnover of people is so destructive to your organization. And so being able to have people have a growth path and feel valued and get feedback is really important. When I got certified as a parent coach, I took 2 year-long classes that involved, meeting with clients, getting trained, doing classwork work, taking tests. Part of it's part of the International Coaches Federation. And so I learned how that translates and is different than a business setting, right? And how and how to get people to embrace things that you don't have the same authority over, and so there is a difference, and they're not the same. But again, if you have a family meeting on occasion where you discuss your values, or you discuss some of the rules of the house, or how you're operating as a family, and it doesn't feel like you're sending out the agenda a week in advance for input, and it
should be catered,
a relaxed family thing, that's a good thing. And sometimes it's good to do those kinds of things when you're on a family outing. You're somewhere where you're relaxed and you're not sitting around a table, and you're just kind of talking and sharing and being part of a family, and having it done at the right time and the right way makes a big difference too.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit before we started about times when it doesn't work out. You always hear about parents who, from the outside, they look like they've done everything right, been with their kids. You always see them at the playground, everything. They look like they're fully involved parents, and then something goes awry, especially around adolescence. Does that happen in your experience? Does that just happen organically, or do you think there was always something there that wasn't working out? I mean, mental health issues aside, I mean, if your child really has severe mental health issues and a brain imbalance in some way, but I'm talking about the kid who just follows a different path suddenly.
Yeah, my reaction to that is that, a parent's conceived notion about what a kid should be and how the kid should be is kind of ill-conceived. Prior generations, the woman was raised to be a mom or be a teacher or be a nurse.
Yeah.
And that's all they could be. Thank God that's changed. And but men were raised in a way to just for certain business achievement and the path that they were supposed to take. They're supposed to become doctors and lawyers and other things like that. And kids have their own idea in terms of what they want to explore nowadays, and parents need to support that. And if they have if they have no issues, mental issues, mental struggles, addiction issues, school struggles, and all the rest, and the parents just want to be better parents, then the kid will take a path and have a better experience having engaged with me. And the parents will be more confident and joyful and not carry that burden with them. When kids do have an issue, and they've had some trauma or experiencing some adversity, hopefully they learn from it and can grow from it. But if they have some scar tissue, or they, or they do have a struggle. My daughter, for instance, has anxiety and depression issues. That's what got me into this business, is realizing that it was lonely and I didn't know where to turn, and she was struggling, and it got worse and worse and worse. And we got her help, thank God. We gave her the gift of wilderness therapy and residential treatment, which actually took her out of her environment where she had spiraled to the point where she wasn't safe to herself or safe to others. It got that bad. And so when she got more advanced therapy, it really helped her. We invested in parent coaching. It really helped us. But she's pre-wired for anxiety and depression. You can medicate her to death. You can provide her the coping skills. The good news is she works. She's in the pet care industry. She lives with her boyfriend. She's a productive member of society who's not dangerous to others or to herself. But she has issues where she's anxious because that's who she is. So she just needs to be able to deal with it in a more mature way as she's aged, as she's learned how to deal with it, but that doesn't mean she gets anxious, doesn't get anxious at times. So people who are addicts or, you know, had alcohol or drug problems will be predisposed to that. They have to know what triggers them and to not fall back, right?
And so it sounds like in those situations, would you advocate like a combination of therapy and coaching, or
well, don't forget, I coach the parents in how to deal with the children who have the issues. So the children may need their own coaching or their own therapy. Sometimes I do family therapy too that involves the kid, but it's only after the parents have been engaged with me, so I know that they're aligned and know how to address the kid. And so, you know, there's a reason that they don't call it childing, they call it parenting, because parents have so much influence on how their kids develop and how they are able to handle that experience. And so I focus on the parents, and the parents, you know, if they work with me, depending upon the issues, they tend not to need therapy. They tend to just need the parent coaching. And the difference is therapy is more diagnosis and healing. Mine is more, you know, if you look at it from a business sense, is more of assessment and acting on it. And putting a plan together that leverages strengths and works. And so I tend to like the parent coaching part because it's effective and it sticks. I'm proud, the thing I'm most proud about is the impact that I have with parents, and the feedback I get is so positive. And if people look at my website, you'll see that I have nearly a perfect Google score in reviews. And it's just because, you know, I'm empathetic because I've been through it as a parent. I've got enough, I received the benefit of parent coaching, so I can put myself in the shoes of the impact that it has and the way it has. I have the training in it. And because I'm a guy, those combination of things allow me to be pretty effective. And you know, I was, you know, I was not doing things well for my child, right? And I needed to learn, and I wish I had the support and the, you know, the ability to reach out to a parent coach sooner, or things may have been different in my journey.
I think that alignment part is really important too, that if you can get both parents involved at the same time, so they're speaking the same language and they're in agreement on the values and all the rest. Very important. That is
the ideal scenario, and I try and work really hard because it makes it that much easier for them. But if they're not fully aligned, then one is, it's more important to have at least one authoritative parent if you can't have both. And then the second thing is, at least figure out your differences ahead of time or behind closed doors, as opposed to doing it in front of the kids where they see the gap and they're able to exploit it. So
it's interesting to me, if you say you've got one authoritative parent and one permissive parent, or one checked out parent, where the daily experience sometimes is the kid is, you know, really happy with the permissive parent because it's always like, oh, let's get popcorn and ice cream, and the authoritative parent is kind of setting out the boundaries. Quite often the reaction for the child longer term, not the day of the popcorn and the candy, but later on, the child's really has a lot more respect for the parent who did set the guidelines. I mean, it's a different type of relationship than the one they have with the one that
does occur, and that when that occurs, that's very difficult. And you're right. Ultimately, they have more respect for the one that held them accountable. But what I try and do is make sure, again, if you have one that's not involved or less involved, that at least there's compromise on certain things, and then there's alignment. So if one person likes to reward the kids constantly, you know, everybody gets a trophy, or they rescue them all the time, and the other parent's more authoritative, that there's at least a discussion and a compromise. So they decide how to compromise and what's important for the family.
Yeah.
And sometimes the uninvolved or permissive parent may dig their heels in, and the more authoritative parent basically says, okay, well, we'll go with you that time, but that's your silver bullet when I want to demand something more, or be more responsive or sensitive on something. I need you, we'll talk about it, and I need you to know that that's important to me. And on the other things they compromise on. Now, where it's the bigger problem is where you have co-parenting, where you have divorced parents or separated parents, where there's one parent that's the fun parent and the other parent is actually taking all the responsibility. And often the fun parent's the dad. And what's important there that I try and make sure is important is the parents separated for a reason. They weren't getting along, right? Or they weren't being able to figure things out. And then they're trying to have to figure things out in the best interest of their kids with a lot of hard feelings in separate environments. And what I try and talk to I don't work with both parents. I work with one of the separated parents, is basically the rules in your house and the boundaries that you set in your house, especially if you have a blended family or have gotten remarried or have a new girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever. Those are things you need to set in your house. You can't control the other side. And so the rules in your house, you decide and implement them. And what you basically say is, hey, when you're here, we love you. We're going to support you. These are kind of the things that the boundaries in our house. When you go to mom's house or dad's house, they have their rules. If there's something that conflicts, I'm going to talk to mom or dad and we're going to try and figure it out. And I'll always be looking after your best interests, but recognize that I can't tell mom or dad what to do unless it's, unless legally that's the situation. And that takes a lot of pressure off, because you feel like you have to manage both sides, and it's really not practical,
Oh, we should come back and do a whole nother episode about this alignment between parents and the co-parents scenario, because it's endlessly complicated, and it plays on the marriage or the reason for the divorce, and is a key aspect of parenting. So
anytime you want to do that, I'd welcome it. I had one specific instance where a couple was separated, but they couldn't really afford to live separately. And so the dad lived in the basement and the mom lived upstairs, and the kids shuttled in between.
That's happening more and more. Yeah.
Yeah. And the biggest fights were over screen time, right? Where the kids would have more limited access to screen. The parents would agree on the certain amount of screen time that they could have, but then the kids would go upstairs and say, I haven't been on my iPad at all.
Again, not manipulative, but just because the opportunity was there. Well, Andy, it's really been a pleasure talking to you about a lot of these concepts are very familiar to me, but you put a lot of things in some structures and formats. I think that a lot of dads especially can understand how you're thinking these things through and the logic involved. And I think both of our messages is being involved and intentional, and having structure as a parent that you can then convey to your kids. So your website is parentsjourneycoaching.net. And you have an offer for is it a free hour of discovery call, like a free coaching 1 hour?
It's usually half an hour, but the idea is, I got into this, I was, an entrepreneur who made some good money, and that satisfied a certain need and allowed me to achieve a certain lifestyle. But the impact of parent coaching is really immense. And I got into it to help people. Obviously there's some value that I provide that I expect to be compensated for, but I don't try and push anything on anybody. So if somebody has an issue, I had a call this morning with a contact that I had from 6 years ago who's got a child now who's struggling, and called me up, and I offered some resources and some advice and some thoughts that made them feel better about themselves, and also made them feel better about their path without engaging anything relating to my services. And so that's fine with me. If somebody wants to engage and I'm a good fit and I can really help, fantastic. If I can't, then I can just be an ear, or I can provide some guidance. happy to do that too. And so, you know, on my webpage, you can schedule an appointment. My calendar pops up. And, you know, happy to have that discussion with anybody, because again, it's called Parents Journey because it is a journey. And, you know, there are times where you take, you know, 3 steps forward and 0 steps back, which is rare. Sometimes it's 2 and 1, sometimes it's 1 and 2, and sometimes you're 0 for 3. And
yeah, I encourage everybody to take Andy up on that offer, because especially if you're looking for this type of help, it's really helpful. It's really great to be able to have a face-to-face conversation, get the feeling for somebody's perspective and whether you can work for them. That's a big part of coaching, is a relationship and how you can work together. So this has really been great. We'll do this again about the alignment. I really appreciate your time today. Anything else you want to add before we go?
No, just I think the control and understanding is a really important part.
Yeah.
And just if you put yourself in your kid's shoes and you think about how they're feeling as they're going through this, it changes kind of the perspective and the dynamic, as opposed to having things go your way or having your own control of things. And so I appreciate the opportunity. The last thing to know is just, I have my own podcast also called Winning Parenting. And so if anybody wants to check that out, it provides different approaches, has different experts, it has an inside look at some of my parenting coaching things. The latest episode has to do with kids who have an addiction issue and how dads and parents, you know, could do a much better job addressing that when their kids are going through that. And so I appreciate all you're doing for parents. Appreciate you hosting me on this great podcast, and look forward to staying in touch.
Okay. Thanks, Andy. Again, Paul Banis with GreatDad.com. You can find my coaching services at GreatDad.com/coaching. Until next time.